All right, welcome back to episode 57. Same thing, corresponding together. Like we promised, guests are returning, and this week we have another former Ripon College baseball survivor. Not survivor, that's the wrong word to use for that. But Dave Knapp, welcome to the show, Dave.
Hello there, long-time listener, first-time caller. Glad to be part of the show.
Nice.
Yeah, we our second lawyer on the show from our friend group. We appreciate you following along on the show. Yeah, hopefully, but we always cut that out. We can revisit that. But no, we just wanted to get you on here. I know you're a fan of the show, and we can kind of talk through some of the things that where you've gone post Ripon, and your experience in law school, and have some fun. So thanks again for joining us today.
Yeah, no, I'm a big podcast listener. Got a bunch of different podcasts I listen to, and certainly look forward to every Monday morning when the weekly Boost podcast gets.
We love that.
That's so refreshing to hear.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it's usually one of the first podcasts I listen to on Monday, and I mean, especially now since I have a little bit more time, it's something I look forward to in the day.
So good. So you're a podcast fan, not necessarily like audiobooks.
I would say it switches a little bit of both. I think podcasts are nice. Usually the ones I listen to are right about an hour long. And so it's good when driving. I probably prefer listening to podcasts over listening to music. I would say I probably prefer podcasts over reading. But sometimes I have more than just like an hour to spare, and I run out of podcasts in my queue, and so I'll download an audiobook that is similar to a podcast, because I think all the podcasts I tend to listen to kind of have the general same thing. They're news related or politics themed or law related themed, and except the weekly boost, which is kind of mine.
I think it's the changing way we get our news too, I think is that I mean, you fit kind of into that trend too, and so do I. It's like not the traditional newspaper that's super old, right? But like I feel like podcasts are that medium now that like either everybody has one or everybody has a long queue like you that they listen to. And I know like we've said this before, but like I haven't listened to as many because we're kind of worried about like our own thing, but I still have my handful that I go back to and all that. But
I think COVID has done some stuff to that too. It's just that it's given people so much time to make their own kind of podcast. Every congressperson now has a podcast, and so if you want to listen to your representative talk about whatever issues they care about, you can find them and hear kind of what they have to say. And it's a lot like Twitter in that way, which is a whole separate thing.
Yeah. What a place, man.
Well, and I think one of the cool things that like podcasts offer is like the ability to like have a good conversation. But I think a weakness of it is seldom do we see live podcasts that are touching like real, like as it's happening information. And so it's kind of going to be a weird shift to see the direction of podcasts turning towards that news, like kind of the live, current events type deal. And like you can sort of see with ours, right? Like we record it, however many days in advance. We miss a lot of information. I remember when we like a couple episodes ago, we did the Olympics, right? And we covered that for a little bit, and so much information happened even the next day after we recorded it. We're like, oh, well, dang, we have to realize, and I think podcasts do a really good job, is that not everything is comprehensive. Not everything is all inclusive, right? Like we're covering a topic, and there's still some pretty good strong suits of like the news, like live news and stuff like that. It offers stuff that's happening currently or as current as a story can be written up and, displayed to the audience. But it's kind of it's like a really cool medium for stuff to kind of, for messages to be conveyed, right? Because it's all organic, at least we try to be, and everybody else tries to be. And at the same time, you try to cover really pressing issues. It's like, you have to have a balance to do it, I think. And it's kind of a cool thing that we're going to see evolve as time gets, as time goes on. So.
And the range of podcasts, I mean, you can talk about sports, you can talk about, the news, you can talk about, science, you can talk about really whatever you want. I mean, they're a lot like books or, I mean, TV shows. It's kind of funny how this is only now really starting to become a big thing when maybe seems kind of obvious in hindsight.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's always obvious in hindsight, right? Well,
always is.
I want to start here because it's kind of funny. So we lived together my freshman year after my roommate moved out, and then we lived together. We kind of had similar paths, I guess. We both were chem bio, right? Like science, that intention, and you flipped, and then I kind of flipped. So talk to us about like what you went from and what were the kind of motivations to why you kind of pivoted.
Yeah, I came into undergrad probably like, I mean, 50% of all people. I mean, that they want to be a doctor, like, and then they take their first biology class and they get a C in it or something. It's like, oh, maybe I I can't be a doctor anymore. It's funny because I think I did okay in my biology class, but I think it was quant for me that I was like, oh my God, I hate this. This is not fun. And so I kind of like did a little bit of a self-evaluation and just thought, like, is this something that I could see myself doing for the long term? And science is interesting because you can do so many different things in it. But there was just nothing that I think that I really enjoyed, even though I was good at it. Yeah. But my freshman year, I took an intro to politics class at Ripon, and I really enjoyed that. But because I was kind of on my science path, I never really gave it much thought after that class until quant, until I realized how much I hated that. And was like, okay, I need to do something new. And so I think I kind of went through a little bit of a transition where I was like, okay, well, maybe I'll be more focused on the politics, but I'll still focus on healthcare, and that way I can still justify these science classes. But honestly, that was just like kind of fooling myself, just trying to make it so the time that all the credits that I got in science were not completely worthless. But I think then maybe towards my junior year, I just kind of realized, okay, this is a dead end here. I don't want to do this anymore. And so I started doing the politics route. That's what it was at Ripon. Politics and government. I think most like universities, it's called political science or a bunch of different variations of that. But I kind of had the thought of going to law school, and law school is kind of one of those areas where you can kind of go in with no super specialized background. Like I don't think you can go into medical school without having a science background, but you can go into law school with knowing nothing about the law and having completely a science background, which was a benefit to me because I think I had a partly science-based background, but a politics background too. And that was a natural fit for me.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. That point that, well, two things from that. One, like you wanted to justify, the credits that you I mean, we stuck our arms in Mill Pond or whatever to get water that one time for our project in quant. But it's like this. You want to justify it, but I think those skills are kind of transferable. That it's interesting that law school you don't necessarily need to. Like, I know medical schools kind of pride themselves on saying like they take majors of all sorts, but you really need to knock out those core prereqs, like you said, right? Like Austin's familiar, and
been there, done that.
I mean, all of us have because we've looked at it prospectively. Yeah. But the ability to kind of like not cut your losses, but recognize like, okay, like my heart's not in it. Let's transition. I think that's interesting that law school kind of gives you that freedom to kind of learn it, and you're using those problem solving skills from your science, background, not necessarily using the base knowledge you learned, but the ways to get to the answers. Like you said, you're good at it, but your heart's not in it. So then like, what's the point of, keeping going with that?
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think that you can kind of look at the two tests that you need to take for medical school versus law school. the MCAT and the LSAT respectively. And then I think the MCAT, you have to take like it asks your science knowledge. You have to know about DNA, or you have to know about genetics, biology, chemistry, like certain specific science things that you have to learn. Where the LSAT, it's kind of a weird test. Like the three sections they break it down into is like analytical reasoning, where you kind of do like puzzles in a way, logical reasoning, and reading comprehension. And so those are kind of tough skills to just like learn. You can't really take it.
Yeah.
Because I took a prep class or a prep course where you can like watch lectures on how to do that. And I'm not sure if it actually teaches you any skills, or if it really just teaches you how to game the system. But I think they're just two very different tests that you have to study for. And I think that kind of shows that how law school is a little bit more accepting of just like a wide variety of backgrounds. And I that's something that law school definitely tries to sell you on, is that like, oh, we'll take all sorts of majors. And I think the tests are evidence of that.
I'm going to be honest. I took the MCAT, and if you didn't either major in physics, chemistry, or biology, much of that exam would have been, first time seeing some of this stuff. Right. Like I've heard like math and psychology majors. Yeah, there's portions of that on there. And like, I know 2 psych majors right now that are going to go in to do it and take the MCAT and stuff. I'm like, okay, those are really nice parts on that exam too. But I've heard the same spiel, like, oh, no, you can be, accounting or finance and try to, work your way up to taking this exam and stuff like that. I'm like, no, some of this stuff was like building block material from like freshman year of high school. Like you have to like remember and regurgitate it that long is insanely just like thinking on that about that as a concept of like human thought. You're like, wow, like you expect people to remember something from when they were, prepubescent 15 years old. Like, like what, like how do you do that? And like, I think you vouch well for the law school thing, because it is, I feel like from my experience talking with people that have gone and, obviously having this conversation with you, Dave, the LSAT route it sounded like it was something that you really enjoyed doing. And I know it's still an exam, so not too many people care to take exams like, in their free time. Right. But we're happy for you. You're doing well. So good job with that.
Yeah. I mean, as far as exams go, I think, the analytical reasoning, like the puzzles of it, talked to Mike and had him do some when I was studying for it. And I mean, those can actually be kind of fun. Not so much when you're actually taking the exam and you're like under time pressure, but
I always like, I took the GRE just so I could apply to schools, and luckily, you didn't need it. But yeah, the med school, law school, like you said, like when you come into college, there's so many people that are like, I'm going to med school, or I'm going to law school. And it's like, it's kind of predictable. And I don't know if that's like a reflection of society kind of, putting some of these professions on a pedestal, but it's interesting to know more about the LSAT compared to the MCAT, and kind of seeing where those two, like they're huge tests, right? But the composition is different. And it's like this mystical thing too. It's like, okay, I'm going to take the LSAT. It's like, all right, what does that mean? Like for me, at least, that's kind of, like I never knew what was exactly on it. I just know you have to take it. Like if you're in Wisconsin, you don't need to take the bar like we had talked about, but interesting. So for all the viewers, where did you end up going to law school?
Georgetown University Law Center.
Okay. What brought you there? I remember, hearing about it, senior year, about where you're thinking about going, but what drew you to Georgetown?
Yeah. So I think maybe most importantly, it's a ranking thing as far as law schools go. I mean, maybe this is just important to know. I think law schools, more than medical schools, I compare to medical schools because that's like the other type of school that I know something about. It matters kind of the rank of your law school. And so there are like certain cutoffs. Like if you go to Harvard, Stanford, or Yale, like those are the top 3 law schools. Like after law school, you can basically do whatever you want to do. Like if you average a C in those law schools, like you still went to Harvard, Yale, Stanford, right. So you can basically do whatever you want. Mm-hmm. And then after that is like what's called the T14. And so those are like the USA News top ranked 14 schools that for a long time, I think since like the 1990s, they've always been the same 14 schools until recently. And so if you were part of those schools, it's also kind of like a big deal. Like you can't maybe do exactly the same thing as like Harvard, Yale, and Stanford, but you can still go to basically it just opens up your career path after law school by going to a big school. Then there's like the top 50, and then I think maybe after that it's probably like top 100, which is different than like medical school. I think like there's probably good schools and there's bad schools, but my impression is if you got into any medical school, like you're a smart person and you can do a lot of good things. Like I think law school is a little bit easier in that sense. I always like to joke that, that there's a lot of dumb lawyers out there. There aren't a lot of dumb doctors. And so I think Georgetown is a very highly ranked school. And so I think that was a big part of it. And, I was fortunate enough to get in. I don't know what about me got me in, because I don't think it was particularly test grades. But something got them to be interested in me. But then I also wanted to be kind of in federal government. I wanted to work doing something in the national security field. And there's really no better place to be doing that than the nation's capital.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Yeah, it's kind of, I think Georgetown has that like reputation that a lot of like the schools that you mentioned before have like that name. It says something, right? And I'm sure like when what you're talking about hits the nail right on the head, like you see somebody, you get a resume or CV and it's like, Georgetown Law or like Harvard, Yale, Stanford Law. It's like, okay, they obviously are, they put in the time and that work and the effort to do something, or at least they went to a place that allowed them to have this opportunity. I think you're exactly right. It opens doors for people just by the namesake of the place that you go to. And especially with what you're talking about wanting to do, I don't think of a better place to go than the East Coast for working in the federal government, because everywhere you turn, I feel like there's a federal institution of some sort. Like NIH is out there in Bethesda, you got Pentagon, you got, the nation's capital itself out there. I think you picked a pretty good spot to do all the stuff that you wanted to do from what it sounds like. So.
And yeah, I mean, particularly my interest in things, like I said, I'm kind of interested in national security. I think that is a kind of a special thing as far as government work tends to go. So I mean, like if I was interested in the environment, and I wanted to do something in the federal government, there are places for that in Wisconsin, Minnesota, the Midwest, Southeast, wherever, all around the country. National security is kind of one of those things that like it has a centralized hub, which is right. DC. And so I was very, very fortunate to get into the school that I did, and certainly had a lot of fun while I was there.
Nice. Yeah. And how does so obviously small town Ripon, right? And then you move out to, big East Coast area. What are some like major differences that you've noticed, like things that you miss most, things that you've kind of grown accustomed to? If you could just give our listeners a little bit of a rundown.
Yeah. I was raised in northern Wisconsin. My high school was a town of 2,000 people, but I grew up in a town of 500 people. Ripon, I had like 5,000 people, close to that. Maybe less, but maybe more. And DC has 10 million in a 10-mile radius. And so, it was a little bit of an adjustment for me. I'd never lived in a city. I had been to like the Twin Cities for like hockey tournaments, baseball tournaments, whatever, just for like weekends. And so, even those cities are not really the same as like the metropolitan area that is DC. And it took some getting used to, just kind of like I didn't have a car, for example. And so like walking everywhere, walking to school, walking to work, like, I mean, I found that to be pretty convenient. And
right.
I mean, that's just an example of a difference compared to Ripon or growing up in northern Wisconsin. I mean, another thing is the diversity. I mean, again, Ripon, I don't know what their diversity quotes are. I mean, but certainly my high school, 90 to 95% white.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's just being out in DC, just being exposed to that, I think is a fortunate thing for me. I mean, just being able to experience different perspectives on things that, like, you know, you read about, you can read a story, you can read a book, but to actually hear from people that are different than you, I think is probably a pretty important thing, and something I was, again, very fortunate to experience.
I think those big cities do a great job of being cultural hubs for people to kind of all gather to, come to, and kind of congregate in a way, so that way perspectives can be learned and experiences can be heard, right? And that's the whole point, I think, of like what we try to do as humans on Earth, is try to gain the most out of each other in a non-selfish way, but sometimes selfishly, of course. But like just hearing people's stories, I bet, is just, you know, remarkable, because you're so close, obviously, to the Atlantic Ocean, and hearing like the history behind that kind of journey as well, and like the amount of people that came over and settled on the East Coast and now have mini communities all across, you know, up and down the waterfront. It's one of like the top places I wanted to go to. It's like East Coast and then West Coast, because it's just so cool. Like you can never run out of things to do out there, I feel like, and I'm sure you know, experiencing that firsthand, compared to you know, small town Wisconsin, kind of your aesthetic growing up, and much like mine and Ben's. So it's nice that you get to branch out and do all those sorts of things.
Yeah, just being able to, like, you know, have stuff to do. Like, I mean, earlier today I went to the mall, which, I mean, if in northern Wisconsin, the nearest mall to me is an hour away. I mean, driving it, like, for me, it was like 5 minutes, and I can just do that without like any planning or anything like that. So I think being able to do something like that is also a nice element of living in a city.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah. I kind of want to ask like one more law school in general question. It's just like, how does the workload compare to undergrad courses? Like, I would assume there's tons more reading, right? And like, how are classes structured, and you know, how are you able to kind of do that work life, you know, in this case, school life, but that balance?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think the structure of it is very similar to undergrad. Like, I mean, you'll have lecture classes for some, you'll have seminars for others. I don't think that part is too different. I mean, maybe the biggest difference, besides obviously just the substance of the material, is that you actually have to do it.
Yeah.
Right. In undergrad, like, I think I probably could get away with, you know, doing half the readings or skimming the readings or whatever, and just kind of getting by in class. And you know, it depends on the class, and whether like you have to take exams throughout it, or whether there's just papers, or whether there's labs in it. But in law school, I think you really, well, I mean, I guess maybe one structural difference that maybe most people don't know going in is that most law school, at least from my experience, you are graded on one exam at the end of the semester. And so, like, you don't have quizzes throughout. You don't have like a midterm. Maybe some classes do that. But I think those were in the minority. Most of my classes were either one final semester paper that you kind of like worked on throughout, or one final exam. And so, like, you either know the content by the end of the class or you don't. Which I think is different than in undergrad, where like you had a bunch of quizzes and maybe like a midterm that kind of like spread out the risk of some of your grading.
No extra points.
Yeah, not a lot of extra credit. Yeah. Certainly. And I think I haven't given a lot of thought of whether that's a good system or not. But it certainly makes sure that you have to know the material by the end of it. So you have to know the stuff you learned from week 1 and the stuff you learned in week 14. Yeah. You have to know that and everything in between for that final 4-hour exam or however long it is.
Yeah, that's daunting too. Like, especially in your first couple weeks, and especially like for you, for instance, let's say transitioning to life in DC, law school, like being fully on your own, let's say, like that's a lot. And then now you have to make sure you know all this because your not career, but like your grades depend on it. And even if you're at a good institution, like it's better to get A's than C's. But
yeah, and I think law school certainly has that reputation for being cutthroat. And I mean, I don't think that really isn't true from my experience. Everybody in my section, like, I don't think there were, my section had, my incoming class was a class of like maybe 600, I think. That's the largest law school in the country too. And so like, that's, I think maybe Masson's closer to 100. I can tell you like Marquette, what that number is. But so my section, there are 6 sections. So I had a class of 100. Everybody that I knew in the class was very nice, and I don't think like anybody would. There used to be stories out of Harvard during the 2000s and 90s of like people tearing out pages of the library textbook to make sure that their classmates couldn't read the material or whatever. But I mean, I had zero experience with any of that. That I think I forget where I was going with all that. But,
well, that led me right to a question, so that's good. You say it's kind of cutthroat. It's like job. I know you have a job now, but like, is job placement pretty competitive, or does it seem to be like the market's pretty good still for, because you look at Georgetown, your class at 600, and all these other schools are having 100 plus or whatever it may be. Like that's a lot of competing lawyers to find spots at firms or wherever, you choose to go with it. Does it seem to be, still pretty highly competitive, or is the market kind of open that way?
Yeah, I mean, I don't, since I found my job, I've just had less interest in knowing exactly what the market looks like. I know, like during the recession in 2008, that was like the worst time to be coming out of law school. Big firms were kind of like closing down or either just reducing their hiring. I think since the market's been doing pretty well, like, I mean, you hear stories about there not being enough workers right now. Mm-hmm. My feel of it would be that like it's a good time to be coming out of law school.
Sure.
I mean, it certainly depends on like what you want to do. Like I applied to the DOJ, the Department of Justice Honors Program. That's always usually pretty competitive. I mean, if you want to work anywhere in federal government, I mean, there are certainly jobs that are like, if you want to work at a big firm, that's like one of the name brand firms that are a big deal in lawyer world. Obviously, it's going to be pretty competitive. If you're trying to get a federal clerkship somewhere, that's a big deal in the lawyer world. It's going to be competitive. But if you want to go be a solo practitioner in northern Wisconsin, like after you graduate law school and pass the bar, you can do that. Like, I mean, like you can go make a job if you want to.
Sure.
As a lawyer.
That makes sense.
Which is kind of nice.
Yeah.
So like with all this competitiveness and like this kind of, I don't like the cutthroat mentality because I get it. Everybody's trying to get their own kind of piece of, the law school pie, for lack of better words. But do you still feel like there's like a collaborative, feeling in the, like around like your colleagues and your peers, right? Like, do you feel like there's still like that sort of push to like, there's a common goal, or is it because it's such a kind of, people are coming in with different ideologies, different kind of directions they want to take their law ability, and kind of how that works into the idea of, well, we're in this place, this learning community. Like, do you still find like that, the collaboration is still as important as you would see it as like at an undergraduate institution, like in your Catalyst class or whatever you guys had before Catalyst kind of deal? Like, do you see that? Or, yeah, FYS.
Yeah. So,
do
I
you
mean,
see that?
I mean, I don't want to leave the impression that I had a cutthroat experience, because I mean, I didn't. I think my class, I don't know if it was atypical, but there was, again, not a person in the class that I didn't like, that I didn't think was a good person and that I could have a beer with, or that I could have a conversation with.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I mean, certainly, I tend to lean a bit more conservative, and especially when you're going to an elite. I mean, if you just go to a law school, or I mean, you could say this about undergrads, you're in the minority, and as far as your viewpoint and like being able to talk to people and about like kind of political ideas or whatever. There are less political, but like maybe more just like legal ideas that can be like conservative or liberal. But like, I mean, I feel like I could talk to any of my classmates about any of that stuff and just have a thoughtful discussion with them. And, I mean, you don't need to be like best friends with these people, but I mean, just like in a class, you can have these discussions with people that are valuable both to them and you. I mean, I think maybe it's a little bit of a cliche, but you learn the most from people that disagree with you rather than just having one big kind of agree fest.
Well, that's refreshing too. That's my word of the episode, Austin. Refreshing. It's refreshing to hear that too. That it's almost like, you're in law school and you kind of have this like common understanding. You're just like trying to figure out things about, it doesn't necessarily have to be political ideologies, but just like the different elements to law and how they may benefit one side or the other. But it's right to you're right. It's nice to have that conversation, and especially today, right? Like everything turns into, there's the other word, cutthroat. Everything turns, coming at your throat. Like, no, like let's talk about it and figure out where, like for me, there's a lot of like legal history that comes up, especially with like African-American historiography and things. And, so we talk through legality of stuff, and sometimes that kind of gets into the weeds, and I don't envy kind of what you do and look into, but getting back to the original point, like it's nice to hear that everybody can kind of have that conversation, and if there are disagreements, use it in a useful way, and not not that you wouldn't, like you said, not have a beer with them now just because they said something to you in your seminar a week ago or whatever. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure it depends on the type of class that you're in. I mean, a lot of the first year classes that you're like required to take, they aren't very sexy in the sense that like they promote a lot of disagreements. Like I think maybe like constitutional law might be the one that promotes like the most kind of discussion, and you can have debates back and forth between like what you think the law should be or shouldn't be, compared to something like civil procedure, where it's just you kind of gotta just know the rule. You have to know how many days you have to answer a complaint or something like that.
Sure.
And then I took like seminars that were national security focused, and I mean certainly there are debate and disagreements about what national security law should be, but it's certainly nothing that is kind of fiery as like abortion law or something like that.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah.
Well, let's shift away from law and politics and all that, current event stuff. I want to hear if you're excited for the Dexter reboot.
Yeah, no, I really am. I think Dexter was one of those shows that I don't know if we watched the entire series or when you kind of came into that. I know that was the thing that
season 2 around there. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I came around season 2 and kind of watched it to the end with you there. But sorry, continue.
Yeah, I don't remember when I started it, but I think I'd probably seen it once because we had watched it freshman year to the listeners.
Yep.
We had watched it freshman year when Ben and I were roommates with Josh Oswald and Randy Finger.
Mm-hmm.
And I think all four of us kind of enjoyed watching it. And now I think they ended the show sometime before we finished undergrad, but now they're rebooting it. And so I think certainly be tuning into that and hoping to see some more Hannah McKay.
Yeah, we've been rewatching it too, and I've kind of been in and out, but it's a great show. Like I forgot some things as it kind of comes up, and kind of excited to see reactions to the end again. Without,
I think there are a lot of cop shows or like those crime solving shows, and those tend to bore me. Like I mean I don't like the CSI series, or I think there are a lot of other ones, maybe like a Hawaii 5-0. I think Mike's into that one. But it's just like unless it has something like interesting or unique about it. And I think the premise of Dexter, again, for the listeners that don't know, is that he's kind of a cop. He's a forensic analyst, but he's a serial killer that kills bad people. And so I think that's kind of like an interesting twist to the show that makes it not just your average kind of like crime solving.
Like Criminal Minds, when you can kind of figure things out, or everything has the same structure. There's larger storylines that I think make it kind of interesting, and he kind of battles these inner demons kind of thing. And I recommend it, and I'm sure Dave does too, Austin, whenever you get it.
Yeah, I have to check it out. I think I've seen like one episode on accident, and by accident I mean like it was like a clip in a classroom or something that somebody was showing for try to get some kind of example across or something like that. So it's fairly novel to me. I've yet to kind of browse it, but I've heard it got 2 recommendations so far, so it's got to be good.
They're based on books, and I mean I've never read the books, but I know my dad has, and he had said that the books were pretty good, and there are some differences between the books. There's one very funny difference that I will not say here because it is a spoiler, but maybe after the show we can.
Sort of a minor question. I had it on my thing, but I know law school stuff kind of runs in your family. How much of that made not law school a safe bet, but like you can kind of you know somewhat what you're getting yourself into? I know I said no more law school, but this just came up.
Yeah, I mean it's funny. Like especially when I went into like my freshman year and I wanted to be a doctor. By that time, like my dad's a lawyer. My brother was in law school, I think, at the time. And so my dad was like happy that I was doing something other than law school. And then imagine his surprise. And it's funny because there's a running joke in my family about my sister, who is 2 years younger than me. She went to Eau Claire. She's a computer science person.
Okay.
And right now she's working for a cybersecurity firm in the Twin Cities, but it's only a matter of time before she figures out that she wants to be a lawyer.
That's funny.
But I mean, yeah, there was no pressure in that, but there was kind of maybe a safety in the sense of like I can always go and talk to one of those two guys and say like if I have a legal question, or not even a legal question, but just like knowing the approach to law school. I think one of the first things in law school is you learn kind of like how to write, and there's like a specific structure of how you write stuff. But I mean, going into law school, I knew that. I knew, I mean, the structure is called like IRAC or CREAC, or like, I mean, there's different acronyms for it, but it is a structure that I think made intuitive sense to me, partly because I knew through experience just of talking with my dad or talking with my brother about this stuff, that I think that maybe other people didn't have the same kind of intuition or the same understanding until they were taught. And sometimes that takes a little bit, but I was given a little bit of a head start in that sense.
Yeah, and I think funny you mentioned that, like the writing style, like how different that is. It's like I don't know if you remember in your bio days, if you took scientific writing and communication at Ripon, remember that course by any means? Like for some
Robert
reason
Wallace,
that course has stuck with me more than I think any other thing, because it taught me how to write and how important it is to be able to convey your messages in appropriate ways towards your audience. Like for science, I can generally say we're all science minded here. Like we enjoy, like we know a lot about what's going on in the world of science. It requires like a completely separate language from normal English, like, or normal, just any vernacular or any sort of language that you speak. Like it requires some sort of like art. And I'm sure with law writing, it's the exact same way, because I think you have to be like specific but ambiguous at like the same time in like science and law. I feel like that's where it kind of meshes together. Correct me if I'm wrong, Dave, if you come across something a little bit more with the law writing. But it's funny you just mentioned that, because I've been reading like dozens of papers about certain things with the gene that's interesting to me, and that's my research project. And it's like, wow, this is like a whole different section of just academia. It's like learning how to read and write these things in an appropriate way for other people to understand your message, with like without eliciting bias, without promoting thought processes that aren't related towards the subject matter. It's crazy. You take stuff for granted when you're in, like, I feel like in high school, like, because it's like, oh, come on, this is just more garbage that we got to do to kind of get the job done, but like when you kind of get in your own craft and stuff, you realize how important it is. And I feel like it's a cool thing to take seriously.
Yeah, no, I think that's probably right. I remember the scientific writing. Like, I think maybe the biggest takeaway that I would have is the structure of things. Like you'll have like your introduction section, and then you'll have your methods or whatever, and then you'll analysis, and then your discussion as far as science writing goes. And it's kind of important to stick to those sections, because it helps you explain your experiments or your work, and it's specifically designed that way to help you explain that.
Yeah.
And I think that legal writing is very similar. Like in the legal side of things, you have your issue, you kind of explain what your issue is. You'll explain like the rule that like kind of governs the issue. Then you'll have your kind of analysis, your application, where you apply like your facts to that rule, or the rule to your facts. And then you'll have the discussion about like, okay, this is the ultimate conclusion. And like, if you follow that structure, that is supposed to help you kind of explain your ideas of what, and I mean, it's applicable in a law journals, or like what if you want to write kind of like for academic settings, or if you want to write in a practice for a judge. Yeah. Like, I think it's important to do that.
It's interesting to hear too, because like I disagree with you on the scientific writing course. Like it sticks with me for a different reason. Like I learned one thing and then wrote that way in a different science course and then got docked for it. But It's interesting to see the importance of writing, especially like in my field now too. It's like we each have three different distinctly different styles of writing that you can definitely tell like makes you I don't like using good or bad, but like it sets you apart, right? Like a good argument in a historical book is easy to follow. The prose, flows well. It's same way with like a science journal, right? Like you're going to be able to find, the results and explained in a way that is useful for scientists, and then in an abstract kind of get the main points out. But that's nice to hear the law perspective of it, because again, it's like this like mystical like law realm, right? Like I don't know what goes on there. I just know that there's like lawyers in law school and LSAT. Like that's it.
Well, I don't know either. So
that's why we're trying to learn. Any other show recommendations? Let's get back on that track, and then we can kind of end it here. Because I know you're Game of Thrones fan. Is there anything else that kind of sticks out to you?
I'm trying to think of kind of like what I've watched recently. I mean, obviously, like The Office will always be my core, my my go-to. And like, I mean, if you haven't seen The Office by now, you don't deserve to vote. But
do I get half a vote? I'm
That's a pretty good stipulation there, Dave. I like that. That's fun.
Yeah, no, I guess there's nothing that really jumps out at me right now. I'm I'm actually maybe in the opposite direction where I'm looking for recommendations myself, especially since I have so much free time right now until I start my job. Where I'm just looking for stuff to do. And,
Enjoy. I just started Perry Mason on HBO. Just
oh yeah, you told me about that.
Yeah, and we watched The Crown a while back, and it's I don't know. It's harder for me to get into shows as of late. I feel like not that it's like wasting my time, but like I could be spending it elsewhere, and then I end up playing video games anyway. So it's like,
And then
what?
yeah. Then we get
well, I think I was talking with Ben over text message. What I like doing is watching like the historical documentaries, or I don't know what they're called. Like they're kind of like the reenactments, where it's not like a documentary, but it's like it's just like what happens with actors and stuff. So I mean, there was. I think I'm watching one right now called Lincoln Divided We Stand. It's just about like Lincoln. I think it's produced by CNN. And it's just kind of like about Lincoln's life that I've enjoyed watching. Another one, which is actually a little bit more fiction based, was called The Plot Against America. It's an HBO series. It's about a counterfactual that if Charles Lindbergh, who was I think people probably maybe know him because he was the first guy to fly across the Atlantic solo, but he was also a raging anti-Semite and kind of an isolationist. And this was like around the 1930s, where he was a very popular political figure. Maybe a lot of analogies kind of around President Trump, where like he was just kind of like this outside guy that was maybe going to run for president. And at the time, I forget who was the Republican that was run against FDR in the 1940s, but he was kind of from what I've heard, was he's kind of a facile, just not strong candidate. That if Charles Lindbergh decided to run, he could have won the presidency, and that would have not been good for the United States. And so this was like a counterfactual history of if Charles Lindbergh had beat FDR, what would have happened. And it was really a pretty great series. I've never felt so much like apprehension, because it follows the Jewish family living in the early 1940s in the United States, where Charles Lindbergh is president. And my impression was, if you were a Jewish family at the time, you would not like being a Jewish family at the time, because it was dangerous.
Yeah, I'm happy you brought up like these like docuseries, documentary, historical, reenactment type things, because I feel like along the lines of like audiobooks and podcasts, it's another great way to allow yourself to passively intake information. And like, you don't necessarily are sitting down and like taking notes and recording this stuff, and you're like, oh my God, I got to figure out, like, I have to remember this sort of stuff because I'm watching this for informational purposes. It's like that really well blended combination of entertainment and information, and like educational information at that too. And I can't think of something recently that I watched that was like that, but I just know that those are some of the more attractive things for me, because I feel like all three of us are like-minded in the idea that we like to actually like take something away from what we're doing, whether it's, making us critically think, or it's actually teaching us something. But I think that this wave of like passive information, that by passive, that's a really loose definition of passive. I know we're actually like actively watching it and stuff like that, but we retain this information in weirder ways because we're not like sitting down taking notes. We're not regurgitating it on a whiteboard. We're not having peer discussions with these things that are trying to get the ideas to cement themselves in our brains. But like, it's kind of cool because like I enjoy World War II stuff, right? And I could tell you probably like almost like a lot of information about World War II, and I didn't sit down and study it. It was because I watched like these movies and like docuseries and documentaries because they're entertaining and fun. And I think that's a cool way that information can be broadcasted to people, in an ever-growing technological world.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I think that there is a difference between when you are like forced to read something as an assignment for school versus something you kind of just you like doing on your own. Like you want to watch the Band of Brothers series about World War II, and just like you learn just by kind of being engaged and being entertained. And I mean, I kind of take you guys often talk about like the books that you read, and I kind of consider myself a weird reader in that sense, where like my girlfriend, she loves reading like novels or like entertainment kind of. I mean, like the Harry Potter series, for example, or something like that. I mean, that's just not the reading that I do. I tend to read something where I feel like I am learning something. Yeah. And I think that if you can watch a docuseries and learn and be entertained at the same time, I think that's a nice little benefit.
Yeah.
That's pretty neat.
Like the ones that you can watch, as you're doing it, look up stuff and, follow along that way and follow along Wikipedia rabbit holes.
I mean, that's definitely part of it. It's just like, looking up the things and kind of, and I mean, you go down a rabbit hole and you learn just little factoids there for bar trivia.
Yeah, like excellent. Yeah, you're exactly. I was just gonna say the same thing. Bar trivia. We just experienced that. I'm sure if we actually sat down and did the little, the rabbit hole thing, we would have been able to answer, who rode on famous horses. But
who knew Zorro's horse name? Not me.
Yeah, I probably did somewhere, but it's just I like that movie so.
Well, listen, this is great. We had a good time. It was nice to catch up. I don't remember. Yeah. Are you going to alumni weekend? Is that soon? This next month?
I know it's soon. I probably won't be making it back.
Yeah, me either.
I think maybe that's the week. So my brother's wedding, he's engaged to his fiance now, and they're getting married, I think, on the 23rd or 24th, 25th, the weekend, whatever's closest to those dates.
Yeah.
And I think that might be the same weekend as alumni weekend. And so
I think it's first weekend in October. The first, I think first is the day.
Oh, so I mean, maybe it's the weekend after.
Either way, it's close.
Yeah. But okay, yeah. So I think because I was thinking about like, okay, so what if I just stay over in Wisconsin for that week? That way I can make both. But I think that I probably won't be making. And I've always wanted to, like, even though I have a mixed feelings about baseball. At this point in my life, I think it'd be fun to go back and see all those guys and
and
try to throw a baseball.
We were talking about that the other day, or today. We were talking about it, and
it's a beautiful.
It would be bad.
Play catch, and it was
it'd be terrible.
Couldn't make it 25 feet. I promise. Yeah, I know it. It's the thing's gonna fall off one of these days.
I think I could throw exactly one baseball. The same distance as about I threw, but then after that, like, I can't throw a second one. It's funny. I've thought about like joining a baseball league out here, and I've more seriously thought about joining a hockey league out here. Because I know we're trying to end it.
No, but, you're good.
It's funny because I think I miss hockey more than I miss baseball, even though I played baseball longer than I missed hockey.
Interesting.
And I happened to be working for a guy this last summer who is a coach of a men's independent hockey league out here. And I think that I would have more fun doing that than I would playing baseball.
Yeah, it would sound fun and less stress on your arm and your elbow, hopefully.
Yeah, more stress.
Unless it gets rowdy.
Yeah, just stay out of the boards, please.
It's not one of those.
No board crashing. Yeah.
Is it a no fighting league?
I would imagine, like, it would happen. I mean, judging by this guy, this guy's like a vice president of a think tank. Like, I just can't imagine that.
You just
not a good lawyer
every day. Right? Yeah, every match is dropping the gloves. It's just done.
That's funny.
I often, I thought about that. It's just like, what if I got into a fight now? Just like, what would be my reaction to that? I'm a lawyer now, and I can't do any of that kid stuff.
You fight with your brain, right? All three of us fight with our brains.
There you go, something like that. All right. Well, we'll have to have you on again in the future once we got some things working out now, and it'd be great. Maybe we'll have you on for with Michael, and we'll have another game night or whatever, and see what
those are definitely my favorite episodes. The fun and games with Mike.
Air madness.
All right, well, we'll catch you next week. we'll get some stuff planned. So
Yeah, cool stuff coming your way.
thanks for listening.
Thank you.